And here we are again.
This is episode 8?
No,
9.
This is episode 9.
9, and it is, we have to talk about this too.
It's September 11th.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah.
Where were you?
I was sitting at Cerner in a cube in Cerner Business Systems. Heads down, working my butt off, and the guy in the next cube over was a business development executive, and he said, "Oh my God." And I looked over at his screen and I stopped what I was doing. And next thing I know, everybody is gathered around that guy's computer. I don't know why we all had our own. But
right. Yeah, I'll tell you, my experience was I was still working at RSI, and Bob, I don't know if I've mentioned, he had this enormous office in that 1828 Walnut building. And I was in the parking lot, I was walking in the front door, and this girl says to me, she's like, "Somebody just flew a plane into a building." And I said, "Well, that has to be an idiot." Not knowing, right, what really had happened. And so then I got upstairs, and we were at the time like 150 people, I think, about, and like over half the people were in Bob's office. And he had a TV, and everybody stood literally in silence for like 45 minutes, just standing there watching it.
Oh, it was horrible.
Yeah.
It was horrible.
And you know, and as a business owner, you know, it's hard to kind of, hey, let's get back to work, right? In that kind of an experience, right? And I just remember by the end of the day, everybody just kind of left. Nobody was talking, and everybody just left. And it was so quiet that day, I remember.
It was a sad day.
It was.
It was not the day that will go down in infamy,
right.
But it's close to it, I think.
Absolutely.
For Americans.
Yeah. My wife's parents were on a senior trip, and they were supposed to be in New York City. And when she was, at the time we were working together, she didn't connect the two dots and thought, and later that day, she finally realized, oh, they're supposed to be in New York City. And they had left to go to Boston. And so they were not within New York City at the time. So,
wow, I wonder if they're at the airport at the same time.
I don't know.
The terrorists.
There's a red dot on that one.
Yeah, that means it's recording.
Okay. Just want to make sure.
Yeah, I turned the display off, and that makes it a little less.
Gotcha.
Right, oops.
Cool.
Kind of hides it when the display stuff is on. But.
Gotcha. Okay. So we have some topics to talk about.
We have some lists.
Right.
Don't we? One of the things that I wanted to talk about today, and I hope that it takes a few minutes to dissect, because I think it's an important topic, and that's business ethics. I think last week we talked a little bit about misinformation. Right, and the fact that it's affecting the world in such a traumatic way. But I watched a video or a documentary on Netflix this weekend. It's called Social Dilemma.
Oh, yeah, I've seen it.
Have you seen it?
No, I haven't watched it.
Right.
I've seen that it's...
Well, I really liked what they did with that documentary, in that they definitely sketched out for us the monster that is social media, and why it's a monster, and why it's doing the things that it's doing to the American public and to the world. And they did so without ever calling anybody a villain, which I thought was a good way to do it, right? I mean, for a minute when the show started, I figured, oh, here we go. This is an anti-Zucker.
Right.
Mark Zuckerberg, yeah. I keep wanting to call him Zuckerman. I don't know. But this is an anti-Mark Zuckerberg, or an anti, and it turns out it wasn't. They very carefully walked around trying to point the finger at anybody. And they made it clear that there really wasn't anybody to point the finger at, because there was no intention behind this monster coming to life, and it really is just it's partially because AI, right? But not completely. AI is only evil when you set it towards things that you shouldn't set it towards. And in this case, I think the thing that made Facebook evil or Google or anything that's serving up information to you is that they decide, I'm going to give you what you looked for or what we think you want. And so if you get on Google in your browser where you're signed in to Chrome or whatever, and you type a sentence or a phrase, right, like global warming or, any of that, there will be a set of words that come after it, right? Like global warming is a hoax, or global warming is a big threat, or anything like that. And your list of things, I used to think that those were governed by the number of searches, right? And the ones that people were searching the most lands at the top. But that's not true, according to this documentary. The truth is that they're guessing what you want to hear by all your previous searches.
Right.
Which gives you a false sense of understanding the world. It gives you a filtered view of the world that you filtered yourself inadvertently and unknowingly.
Right. Didn't you tell me that you've done searches with your VPN on where it's not assuming that you're in the United States, and how you get different search results and when you do that?
Yep. Yeah. ExpressVPN. Right. Yeah, you can point yourself at anywhere in the world. But I think that is true that it does that. Yeah. It'll certainly, you do a search, for instance, and I said, put me on this server here in the Far East, and you do a search, you'll get, Alibaba before you get Amazon.
Right.
And that's appropriate.
Right.
And if you do a Google search and you type in global warming, I don't know what it would show you if it didn't know who you were, right? Might just have some defaults that it runs to.
Did it talk at all about, like, I mean, I get that if what they're saying is, we built it because you guys told us to, right?
Right.
If that's the message, that's fine. But there also has to be the follow-through message, which says, but if you keep the machine running, you have a responsibility, right? You being, and the way I view it is, I believe that the makers of social media have a responsibility to not do any harm, and that the people who participate in it, me and you, also have a responsibility to understand what it is.
Right.
Right.
We need to understand what it is so that we can act correctly.
Right.
And until I watched that movie, I didn't understand exactly how Facebook worked or how Google's search worked, right? And they're under an obligation to not share that with us. If right, they have shareholders and everybody else that depends on that information being proprietary or being concealed, right? That's their strategy for business. But I think I don't disagree with that there is some culpability there on the social media platform's part, but I don't think that their intent was to build this monster. I think the monster came about because of the massive success that they've had. That means we jumped on their platforms and gave that monster life. Right. They just built a mechanism. We made it a monster. And the reason that it's a monster now is because, advertising is meant to influence us. Right. That's what it does. That's why sex sells and stuff like that. It's meant to change us from one thing to another, from a non-buyer of this product to a buyer of this product. Right. But when you do that and you're good at it, as good as any of these social platforms are, now when you alter an opinion or influence people in a certain direction, even if it's just a step in that direction, you have influenced everybody in the world, or maybe not everybody, but a large enough majority of them that you tilt the playing field, right?
Sure.
And those people that don't believe what, the 90% of the people that you influence to do, they get sucked down there too, just like everybody else. Even if they didn't see the ad, even if they weren't influenced, the people that were influenced then influence them. There is a tipping point, apparently, in social understanding and social beliefs that social media has now found for us. But what it's highlighted is that they now have the control to tip everything however they want to tip it.
So there has been, I've read some articles about this idea that, if to your point, if we're constantly trading eyeballs for dollars, right? Then what happens if we changed it up and said, okay, you can be on my platform, but you got to pay. You can be on you can use Google, but you got to pay for it. Yeah. Now, does that somehow change the equation?
I would love it.
Right.
Sure. I'd much rather have a pay for play system than it's still pay for play now. It's just, what am I paying? Right. I don't know. It's hidden.
Right.
Right. I know what I'm getting, but I don't know what I'm paying.
Right.
And chances are, I'm guessing, whenever you get into a situation where it seems too good to be true, i.e., I'm getting all this for free, it is too good to be true.
Right. Yeah. The article I read was talking about it in the context of Twitter, is that they were saying that they're built on this advertising model too, right? Mm-hmm. And they're saying that they could actually triple their shareholder value if they turned it into a pay for platform where, now I can't remember how that would go. It would be like this tiered pricing plan, right? You'd get Twitter Lite for $10 a month. You'd get full-blown Twitter or whatever access and all the controls, right, for $30 a month or whatever it is. But that changing that idea of going from not paying for it directly to it being a pay to be on the platform changes the dynamic somehow.
Sure, it definitely changes the dynamic. I mean, I don't know that we've, as a society, stopped to think about what the dynamic is currently. So changing the dynamic is probably happening daily, and we just don't. We hear people get frustrated. Well, Facebook took my post off. Well, maybe because they just implemented a new rule that says you can't be this or that or whatever it was. Right.
But what would you want if you were paying for a search? I mean, would you want your version of the internet only?
What would I want if I went to Google and was paying them to provide the search service to me? Mm-hmm. I would want transparency, right? Yes, if you finish my sentence for me, like what I'm getting ready to search for, just make it apparent that this is based on my previous searches, right? That's all I want to know. Or allow me to say, no, make this based on what's currently being searched. Or, just give me the options to use the platform how I want to, not
how you think I should use it.
How you're getting paid for me,
right.
The amount of information that they have on you, and they're keeping it, from what I understand in this movie, because that gives them the power to charge more to the people that are advertising. Because the more that they know about your habits and your search habits and the implications of those search habits, like you go and you buy a lot of tools and a lot of hardware, you're probably doing some construction work or some handyman work, right? They can put the A and B together and have even more information on you.
Right.
So who knows what kind of models they have out there that represent Matt Heelan,
right,
or anybody your age in Kansas City, with these search habits or whatever. And then, so what they're doing is they're selling the ability to influence you, right? It's not, they're not selling you. You're not the product. And you've heard that before, right?
Right.
You're not the product. Your attention is not the product. The ability to influence you is the product.
Right.
Right. And if that is the product, then I would like to say, well, how much are you getting paid to influence me? And how much can I pay you so that you stop that shit?
Right. Well, and there's also been other models that they've talked about that have said, and we've seen this, not to make a connection to our business, but healthcare has been, you would theoretically go on to Google, you'd say, I'll pay you $20 a month for my version of the internet that I want to see, or to your point, for me to be in control of my experience, right? And oh, by the way, I will give you all of my personal data if you pay me for it. Right.
Yeah, or I will not.
Right.
And I don't care how much you want to pay.
So all that stuff that you're using to influence my buying behavior, my age, my weight, my eye color, whatever it is, you can't have any of that. And I'm in control of that. But I will sell you my data for $100 a month, whatever it is, right?
Right. Well, then we'll up our search price to $100 a month and give you a discount.
Right.
How about that?
Right.
They have that kind of control over people. And I think back to the initial thing, that's business ethics, right? Is how have things gotten this far, right? That we have our world, the internet, we have become internet-centric people, right? If we don't have access to it, something is amiss and something's wrong. However, the internet is not just a source of information. If anything, if you could describe it as any one thing, it's a marketing machine. That's it. It's a person influence machine. And what if we decide that marketing is unethical, or at least the unethical parts of marketing, right? To me, marketing is getting your product visible in the marketplace, right? That, to me, that's what marketing is. Getting your product visible has become, well, if I know that you're pregnant and I know that you're not married, maybe I can use a message that forces you to feel a certain way, so you'll go over here and buy this other product or service. Right. To me, that's the part that's unethical. Well, right? It's how we do the marketing that we need to look at.
So here's a bit of a personal story related to marketing. But it touches on everything you're just talking about. It touches on influence. It touches on getting to know you. So, as men age, the theory was that our testosterone goes down, right? There was this guy that I've clicked on him on YouTube. He's a personal fitness kind of guru guy. Sure. And he had some ideas around like different types of food and to lose weight. And so, I'm kind of trying to lose a little bit of weight. So I've clicked on his YouTube ad a couple of different times. So finally, I clicked on the one big ad that says, go watch this video, right? And I do. And I go watch the video. And here's where it fell apart for me. Is he begins the whole video by talking about how cortisol is really what is the anti-testosterone. It's what's fighting your testosterone, right? And which I thought was kind of interesting. I didn't know that. I don't. He cites a bunch of studies. Even on the website, he has a list of all these studies that say that this is true. But he opened up the video by telling me all about all the things that men have been told over the years about testosterone, that you need to apply these gels and take these supplements and get injections and do all this. Those are all myths that have been created. None of those will work. By the time you get to his 35-minute video at the end, what is he selling? A supplement.
Right.
That's the kind of stuff that it's on the border of unethical in my mind. It's like, if for no other reason, it's dumb. Right.
I bet you when you clicked off of that page, it came up with a dialogue. It said, are you sure you're going to leave this behind?
Right.
That's been for a while, like 5 or 6 years ago, my marketing guy, I told you who he was before, right? Wes Harrison used to be a skydiving buddy of mine. He was using that approach. His website was just that. You show up at his website, he'll tell you what the problem is, and then he'll tell you a case study, or let me give you an example, and then he'll tell you what the problem is, and then an example. And 50 yards down the page, he finally gets around to telling you, but right now I can solve that problem for you, and here it is, right? And if you try and click off that page, you get a dialogue that says, well, hold on a second, don't leave yet. And that it's a pretty common pattern, or at least it was at that time.
Right.
And like that one guy told us the other day on the phone, marketers mess up everything.
Yeah.
Right. So it influenced people to read and continue reading and finally click and purchase for a long time. It doesn't anymore, I don't think. As soon as I get to one of those pages, I go, oh shit.
Right. And I watched it knowing kind of what it was, or, on its face, what it is. But that one trick that he tried to pull off, which was to say, at the beginning, you don't need supplements, but by the end, you need my supplement.
Because it's not a supplement. It's different than the rest of them.
Right, but by the time I got to the end, I was like, oh, well, that's contradictory. I'm not going to buy that now from you. So, But yeah, I mean, I do think that there is this fine line between feeling like bait and switch, or feeling like you're being tricked, or that is bad. But there are moments where marketing does work well for you, right? Works well for, is maybe more transparent, right? This is what it is I'm selling you. This is right. And so, there are things like right now, everybody's had this experience, right? Where you clicked on the one product. Now all you do is every time you go to a different website, you see the same product, right? I clicked on the toolbox, right? And they're like, now every place I go, I get toolboxes,
Toolbox
right?
ads,
right?
Yeah, from Snap-on.
Right. And everybody knows what's happening, right? They know that that's why it's happening. Does it bother you? Does it bother me? It's a little creepy, but
is it unethical?
But what if they present me with a really good toolbox at a really good price, and I would have never found it had they not shown it to me?
Right.
That's a good thing.
I think you're right. I don't think it's unethical at all.
Right.
As long as the people know. For instance, if I say, Echo, what is the prices of hammers today? And then I get on Chrome and open up the search bar and it shows me hammers. That's creepy.
Yeah.
Right. And that's unethical, I think. If there is some coordination between these companies to share information and model your behavior across all of them, now like I mentioned earlier, right, is the fact that you do a search for hammers and the fact that you do a search for nails, you can imply a lot of other things by that. And if you can mix your search data with Amazon's purchase data, now what more things can you imply about a person? How much bigger and more accurate of a model of who they are?
Yeah. So Scott Galloway is the guy who I listen to his podcast. He's an NYU professor of marketing. And he claims that what he would like every single month is he would like Amazon to deliver a package of what they think he needs. Right? Because they have so much data about you, right? They know what you've bought in the past and they know all those attributes. He's like, okay, well, if you guys know me so well, then just send me some stuff.
Right. That's the next iteration.
And I'll take out what I want and I'll ship back what I don't.
Does a box show up?
Yeah.
Every week. Mine would have some weird stuff in it.
Hammers and nails, apparently.
No, probably like I bought some tape recently that I didn't even really know existed, although I should have been able to guess. But it's garment tape. And what I was planning on using it for is like when I go down to get my hair cut, the girl I always have all these hairs inside my mask where they float around, and I just wanted to tape my mask shut and cut the strings off it so I can go in there stringless.
Oh.
And I haven't done it, but that's the kind of shit that would show up in my box just out of the blue.
Right. Just garment tape. What?
Garment tape?
Right.
What is this?
Right. Yeah.
That would be fun.
But I mean,
if they had that, kind of like Google has a surprise me.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, what is, as the topic of business ethics relates to marketing, how does that impact? I mean, how does your view of the way marketing is either ethical or unethical in some way affect how you deal with your, illumisoft business?
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly where, why it's important to me. Right. And I do business with a lot of businesses. And I have become quite particular with those businesses that I like to do, or those companies that I like to do business with.
Right.
And there's a customer experience for me that includes absolutely zero bullshit. Right. So if you start our relationship by sending me an email, I don't care what your product is, how perfect it is for me. If you start your email off with a subject line that starts with RE, you are attempting to deceive me, right? Clearly, it's not going to deceive me because I know you're attempting to deceive me. I'm not deceived. But what you have done is you have ruined any chance at a relationship with me, right? Because you started off the wrong way. You started off to think, oh, let me see if this guy's foolish enough, right? Or whatever crosses the mind of the marketing person that decided to use it. And my guess is that they didn't think, oh, this guy's a fool. What they did was they looked at the statistic and said, look, we're getting more people to reply to us if we do RE. Okay, we're going to do RE on everything. I.e., they didn't create a monster and decide to use it. What they did was they did some things and it created a monster, and they're using it.
Well, and maybe a simpler way to look at that too is just to say the thought that went into you doing that is an indication of the character of person behind it.
Yes.
Right.
Or the company.
Right.
I mean, yeah. Or,
right.
And it might not be a direct representation of them, i.e., it might be that they just abdicated their marketing responsibilities and aren't doing their due diligence to even know how that marketing is taking place, et cetera. But it's a huge thing for me. I think going forward in this world, knowing what I know today about misinformation and about the ability for false narratives to influence the entire world, and everybody believes in them, and all of this stuff says that at some point we are already noticing. The fact that I'm noticing it clearly means that there's probably a bunch of other people that have noticed that businesses and marketing and a lot of the things that are just status quo today are not good for us. They're not in our favor. They're using us and taking advantage of us and making our lives miserable for their gain. And I think we're kind of getting that right now. Even just saying that, I feel like it is, it's a dream I'm having and trying to share it with you. Right. But there are real things that we can point to. I mean, the webpage that you went to watch that video is an example of how we market people. We market to people because we know that if we give them enough bad negativity things they're going to get hurt by, that they'll more likely to purchase the product, even if we've told them that products like this are no good for you. Right. Like your supplement. But for me to do business, I feel like I cannot follow any of those patterns, I cannot send an email to somebody that says RE at the beginning of the subject line just because it's not true. To start off an email to somebody and say, hey, you don't know me. That's a good start, Because I'm not trying to convince you that, hey, John, remember that time we went to the lake? Guess what? Buy my product. Not trying to do anything like that. But if I get an email from somebody and in any way it is misleading or trying to make claims that aren't true, there's little to no chance that I'm going to develop a relationship with you and do business. And so I think that our clients are the same way.
Well, and I think that, it does bridge over nicely to a conversation I had this week. I had a conversation this week with a guy named Dave Dalton of Doc ASAP. Doc ASAP is, it's a platform for, and I may get this wrong because I didn't investigate too deeply, but they do a lot of stuff on patient platforms. So like working with healthcare plans and healthcare providers to give them a platform to say, like, here's a notification to schedule your doctor's appointment. So they'll send you notifications, They have all kinds of different tools that they use to help providers sort of efficiently get people engaged in their practice, So I talked to him this week, and I guess the interesting thing about it was that we were just talking about transparency, and one of the things I told him was, I said, Dave, before this call even started, I said, I went out to your guys' website, and I said, I looked at your company values. And I said, you guys have about 6 different values. And I said, of the 6, we match up with 3 of them. And one of them is transparency. And so we started to have a conversation about that. And he started elaborating on the way they do business, and how they do this because of this. And, it was a deeper conversation. And I just think it's really, and I told him, I said, it's really important, especially when you're at the very beginning stages of a relationship, to know who's sitting across the table from you. And it's important for us to get to know, potential clients or partners in that way, because the last thing that we really want is to be 6 months down the road and realize you're not who I want to really do business with. Right. And so, our call was great. We don't really have any real ways to connect at this point. But it was like, if you talk to somebody and make a connection and you realize you share similar values, sometimes that sets the stage for you feeling comfortable working with them if you can in the future.
Yep. I like that approach, Matt. I will adopt that as well. Because I've been having a lot of conversations this week with a lot of marketing folks, right? Since we're in the market.
Right.
And I struggle with the same thing. It's like, I don't really know how to tell if these people are just feeding me a line or if they really have the values that are important. And I have more consistently gone out and looked for things that would give me indicators along those lines on their website. Looking at their values, I haven't done, but that seems like every website either has their mission statement or their values or their all of those things.
Right. And quite frankly, it's our responsibility and their responsibility to test for that, right? I mean, everybody can throw up a list of values on their website and say that they're, all those things.
Yeah.
But unless you can
That's marketing.
Well, right. But unless you can cite me specific examples of behavior that your company has exhibited that demonstrates that, then they're just words on a web page, right? So.
I agree, man.
Yeah. So one last note on the Dave Dalton conversation. I did experiment with, and again, I always assume that some of the listeners are other small business people, is we did, and we've heard feedback from other marketing companies that this is kind of an ongoing trend, is that, how many emails do you think you get a day?
50.
Right. I probably get maybe that. I probably get in my personal account, my Gmail account, I probably get hundreds.
Yeah, a couple hundred.
Right. And it didn't dawn on me. I mean, obviously we know it, but it made me realize that no one wants to read email anymore. Right. What dawned on me was we had several marketing companies tell us that they're using tools like Loom and Drift as a way for them to differentiate their message, right? And then when I realized how those things worked and how we could use them in our campaigns, it just made me realize this is such a better kind of mode.
Why is it better though? What made you come to that conclusion, or Because
it's almost like, you talk about, I have not read the Permission Marketing book by Godin, but it is kind of in that vein though, right? It's sort of like I'm giving you a video and you can choose to delete it. You can choose to watch it. You don't have to, right? Mm-hmm. And so
are you accompanying that video with some words? So maybe if they choose not to click it, or
I've only just started doing it. So, but what I'm getting at is that, and I suppose it's similar to email in that way that you can just hit delete it anytime you want, right? But I went through the effort to record a video. It's a little bit more interactive than email. It conveys my personality in some way. It hopefully demonstrates, or hopefully the presentation gives a short little pitch about who illumisoft is. I think it will create a different level of interest than email does, because it is video, right? Yep. So that's why I think.
And I think that's a great way to do it. And there is a challenge, I think, that comes along with it. If you embed, or if you give somebody, you create a Loom video or Drift or whatever, and you put it into an email, you can't send videos via email. So what they end up getting is a link and your words, and they have those words. I mean, if it's a first contact with them, it's a cold email, those words have to get them over their, I don't click on links from email, especially from somebody I don't know.
Right.
So that's the challenge. I think you can get your message across way better, but you gotta You got to get past that first challenge, which is email.
And also, I think that, the real question might also be, how many corporate email systems are going to, and I suppose they do that with email anyway right now. But I mean, does adding a link to a video, is that any different than, are they filtering, somehow those out? Right.
I don't think they're filtering out video links or URLs at all. But I do think that there's an ethical way to do that. I mean, I'm going back to ethics because I think that we have not considered the ethical way to engage with somebody in a social environment when we deal with marketing, right? We think, oh, we're in business. We gotta, we have shareholders to satisfy, so we're just going to go and do it. This is the best way to do it. Go do it. But the question is never, is it the right way to do it or is it unethical? And I'm sure these conversations are had, but I'd like to draw the line on ethics, where I think it should exist today and not where I see it being drawn now.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I guess the question in the sending of videos is how do you preface it all? I guess is really what.
And I think you just need to have their permission to send it to them, right? So if I would think a good approach now would be you find these people that you would like to engage on social media, right? Somewhere, wherever they exist on social media, you find them if you want to talk to them. And you learn enough about them that you can actually engage with them as a person and not just their name or their email address. And I think often marketing is done like that.
Right.
Here's a bunch of email addresses. We know they all have these characteristics, dunk, and we're marketing to those characteristics. And I think that's wrong. I think we need to market to the people. I think we need to stop making it a numbers game. I mean, it's still going to be a numbers game, but it can't be a numbers game that negates the individual. Right. And I think it is right now.
And I don't disagree with that. I think the balance of that is in some cases, I guess, depending on how it's executed, that could be a longer sales process cycle, right?
Maybe longer sales cycle. I mean, it's not a longer sales cycle. These people, you're not even selling to them. You're trying to
get their interest.
You're trying to get an acquaintance with them so that you can ask them if it's okay if you sold to them.
Right.
I mean, I think that's really what it is. And I know Seth did a really good job in talking about permission marketing. But when I use the term, I'm not talking so much about his book, but just in general, how we interact with people who we don't know, right? Other business owners, other business people, we should be kind to them. We should act to them like people act when they're trying to date each other. You don't just walk up to somebody and demand a date. No, you got to kind of feel them out. Are they the right people for you, right? Maybe you're not the right people for them, and you'll never know if you don't start having a conversation.
Right.
So I think that's what it is, right? I would say to send an email to somebody that has a link to a video in it, I'd probably start by saying, hi.
Right.
Yep, I'm Dan. Yeah, I do this. Looks like you do that, right? Hey, would you mind if I send you a video? I'm going to send you an email with a link to a video in it that I created on Drift.io or Loom or whatever. And the reason I'm sending it to you is because I think it will allow you to see more of who I am as a person, et cetera, et cetera.
No, go away.
Right. If they say no, go away, that's perfect. Thank you. Right. Because now I've been ethical in my approach and I respect your decision and I will go away just like I will if I'm, out in social environment and I get up my nerve to ask somebody to dance or something like that. They say no. It's like, oh, cool.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that in some ways, why participate in the noise, right?
And there's a lot of it.
Right. That's what. So
I think that's what marketing. I think that's kind of been the approach since the advent of the internet. It's like, hey, look at all of these numbers, right? And anybody that's become uber successful online through this new marketing medium has done so by selling products to millions of people.
I just have to interrupt. So we are in the midst of changing our marketing sort of partners,
right?
And it will be important on our end to be able to convey that to them.
Yep.
that is, because that's not, believe me, that's not probably going to be their approach. Their approach may fall more in line with everything that you were saying you don't like about the previous approach, right?
Talking about Axle 8?
Yeah. Where I believe, from what I read on their proposal, that they're going to be more in line with the, here's who you're going after, here's who the target audience is. They check all these boxes. Now let's start, messaging on that.
I think they will too, but
the nuance you're talking about is, well, hold on a second. We want to make sure we engage them this way. Right. So it's not going to be a drastic change from probably the way that they're going to approach, but it's just going to be
more touches.
Right.
It's just more touches.
Right.
Right.
Well, and now but it's also different messaging, Dan. It's different. It's saying your initial way that you're interacting with them is the voice of that is different than probably what a lot of marketing companies would open with. They're going to open with illumisoft's a custom software development company and blah 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 blah, right? And we're saying no, we don't want to do that. What we want to do is this.
Right. It's about you.
Right.
If you get an email, you want it to be about you.
Right.
I mean, I do. If I get an email from a vendor and they go, guess what? Have done this. We do this. Here's our portfolio. You didn't ask me if I cared.
Right.
I mean, you didn't ask me if I cared. You just assumed that you could influence me. And that's the part that gets me probably more than anything. You just made some assumptions and you didn't really care whether those assumptions were true because it's a numbers game. And you didn't really care whether I clicked accept or not because you knew 10 people out of your 1,000 would.
Right.
And I think that's, when you take that approach to marketing and that approach becomes the norm, now we have a whole world that's approaching us like that, where rather than I'm reaching out to 10 people with, a genuine message or a genuine want to talk with those people, I'm reaching out to 10,000 people with an ingenuine message, not caring, right, about the majority of them. And that's the unethical part, is that we're not caring.
Well, that's what's interesting, is that with all that noise that's out there, with the millions of emails that are sent every single day, there's so much noise, but yet there are so few people listening, right? Because they're not messages about you, they're about the mass of people they're marketing it to, right? So, that's interesting. It makes me want to take back a few messages I sent this week. But anyway.
Well, good. I think we should talk about it more and more. I think we are in the midst of a massive change in society, I think. I think it's a change in the way we look at marketing. I think it's a change in the way we look at information. I think it is just a general distaste for everything that is being shoved down our throats.
But it's not about personalization, though. In other words, kind of what you're saying is the way that you're wanting people to interact with you is that they have taken the time to get to know who you are, right?
Or my company, or what value they can add to me, how that helps me, and
Right, but there's so many different tools and techniques out there available that can personalize the way we market to people.
Yeah, I'm not saying not to use them.
No. What I'm saying is it's interesting that with so many tools and techniques out there to personalize the way we market to people, we choose to still market it to the masses.
So far, that has been what has produced the best results for some companies.
Right.
I would say that it's probably not working for all companies. I don't know how it could work. Because if you get 1,000 emails in your inbox every day, let's say they're from 1,000 different small companies that just started up. They're all great companies. In fact, if you signed up with any one of them, it would change your life for the better, absolutely guaranteed. But you're not going to sign up with all 1,000 of those. In fact, if you have 1,000, you will probably grab them all en masse and move them to the recycle bin, right? Because it's just too many to even deal with.
Sure.
I mean, that's kind of where everybody's at right now. I think since it's too many to deal with, they're all bad. None of them are good.
Right. So what was the last marketing message that you've received that you liked?
Well, it was over the top. We are trying to do this the right way, right? In the subject line, they said, we are a third-party software development company that would like to support your efforts or something along those lines. So it was absolutely 100% accurate and transparent. In the first line of the email, they said, "Hi, Dan Prince. We've been out to your website. We know what values you have. We know what you guys do," right? I'm writing this email so that we meet the standards of some anti-spam thing. And those standards include a clear and honest subject line. We did that. A clear and honest message. We're attempting to do that. And an unsubscribe button right here and also at the bottom. Right. And I think that company, the people that wrote that message, realized that we as a people are being inundated to the point that we are sick of it. Mm-hmm. And so I actually responded to them. I was not interested in doing business with them because, companies that want to help me do my development are, a dime a gross. A dime a gross. Used to say a dime a dozen. These guys just don't stop.
Right.
So, but I like his message.
It was authentic.
It was authentic. It was genuine, and it was clear that he was trying to differentiate himself, not by saying we're a better company, but by saying, hold on, we know about you and what you're going through, and we're trying to do better.
Right.
They probably could have done a better message, but that feeling behind it, that they knew that I was sick of it, sick of all the emails, and wanted to do better. That made me feel like they gave a shit.
Do you feel like that the volume of those messages has increased during COVID?
Volume of
just those marketing messages?
Yes. Really? The noise? Yeah, sure has. Funny story.
Yeah.
In our efforts, I told you a couple of weeks ago, I was going to start looking at more lead generation companies because the more we talk to, the more we experience working with these companies, the more we understand what we really want and what we really don't want. So in my efforts to do that, I was getting ready to empty my spam folder, and I noticed these 5 to 10 messages from somebody named Haley McCaskill. And in the message, they were talking about, hey, we provide risk-free lead generation and marketing services and blah, blah, blah. And I thought, I never, ever do this. I never respond to anything out of my spam, right? Because there's a reason you got into my spam folder. Right. I didn't send you there. Microsoft sent you there. Somebody blacklisted you for some reason, and you wound up in my spam box. But in this instance, I had like 8 of those messages, and I go,
don't do it, Dan.
I did do it. I sent him a response. And yesterday we had a meeting. And if he said it once, he said it 10 times. Well, there's a reason that you clicked on my email.
Oh.
And I said, no, you're not understanding me. I'm telling you, that was the exception to a very hard and fast rule that would have got you a tongue lashing had I been up for it.
Right.
But definitely wouldn't have gotten you a call with me. So no, this does not work. Your method does not work. I've proven that it's working because we're on the phone. Okay, we're done.
Oh, wow.
That's how that went. Haley McCaskill.
Well, do you feel like it's about time, though, for you, isn't it? I mean, I guess what I'm getting at is I know you well enough to know that if I was a marketing person trying to market to you, you would be pretty challenging because you're pretty selective. You kind of know what you want and what you don't want.
I smell bullshit from a mile away.
Sure. But for you in your position,
especially if I'm around
bullshit.
Yeah.
Right. But what I'm saying is that if for you, it's not just about bullshit, but it's also about your time, right? It's about your ability to, I don't have time to, evaluate your message and go through all this to see if there's anything really of value there.
I used to say that, and I used to actually believe that it was all about time and efficiency, but it's really not, I think. And I've done some introspection. I think it's about respect. I think that it's disrespectful for people to write RE, some subject line, if that's not really an RE. It's a lie. You're lying to me. You must not respect me if you're going to lie to my face. Right. And you must not think I'm very intelligent if you're going to try and feed me some lies and expect that, oh, he'll just take them. Right. Truth of the matter is you probably don't know me at all. But that level of, that's what I feel the most, right? When I get BS marketing messages, I feel like you just don't have any ability to respect the person that you're trying to market to.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. I think I've told you this story before, but so in a different lifetime, I was in business development for RSI, and I had to
49 minutes, 21 seconds.
I had to. What's that?
Well, that's how long it took you to bring up RSI.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad you're. Well, I mean, it was 15 years of my life, Dan.
I know, dude. It's all right. That's good. I've been waiting to play that trick on you.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to have to write that down to do this.
That's the last time I'll be able to do it. It won't be good next time.
So, but my point is that it is consistent with what you're saying, and this was 10 years ago more, was we would go out and use LexisNexis. We'd find their cases that they were working on. And then my message to them wasn't, hey, this is RSI. We provide litigation support to blah, 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 blah. The message was, we understand you're working on this case. We would give them a citation of the case. And we understand that case has these challenges, blah, 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 blah. We know that you're working on it, blah, and that it might need this. And it was, and I've told you this before, it was a lot of effort to put those messages together, right? Because they were so personal. They knew, it said that I had done my research. It said that I knew what challenges you were facing. Yep. And
you're talking to me about things that are,
and they knew
me.
And I would send, by the end of every day, I think I could only send 10 to 15 of those messages every day, just because you were spending all this time researching, right? But they were super effective, and that just goes to your point, right?
I think that's, we've gotten away from that. I think, I complained the other day to our accountant, Ronnie, about QuickBooks and how they changed this feature so that instead of being able to mark something that I owed as paid with one click, I now have to click around their advertisement, which is basically saying schedule payment online, which would more appropriately be titled schedule payment online with our new service that really isn't us, but a different company that paid us to put this link here. So I was upset about it. And I said, this is unethical. This is unethical business marketing BS. And I told Ronnie this, and I said, because I already pay them. I pay them like $700 a year, $800 a year to use this tool. And now they've made the tool more difficult for me to use because I have to go around their advertisement. And it was crap. And I finally she told me, that's just the way the world is these days, Dan, just all you have to do is just deal with it. And that was not what I wanted to hear.
Correct.
So I dug deeper, and it turns out that thing was there because we signed up for a special account so that we could receive credit card transactions. Well, that account was what allowed them to put that scheduled payment thing there. But this whole time, it's been QuickBooks pushing their new service on me. I finally gave in, Matt. And I said, well, maybe it will be easier. And since I already have that account set up, and I clicked on it. And I actually set up my bank and scheduled a payment through it. And then I got a message thanking me for scheduling my payment through our business partner, Melio. It's not even QuickBooks. They've been pushing this thing on me for months, and it's not even QuickBooks. To me, that's unethical. That's unethical for them to act like this is QuickBooks and this is our service, and it's not.
It's not. Yeah.
I hate them. I hate them for that.
Right. But do you hate them enough to quit?
No. No, there's really no other choice for me, right? I guess there are other choices. If you're listening to this and you have another option for me that is QuickBooks-like, I would definitely like to hear from you. I know Xero is out there and everybody says it's so great, but the QuickBooks people, my accountant and other accountants say, no, don't use it because it doesn't do things like we do it.
Right.
What does that even mean?
Right.
But I need to find something
Accounting
because
practices in principle, right?
Yeah, my accountant has me kind of worried to go with Xero, but everybody else says it's the newest best thing.
This is sort of related, but not. So it falls under the headline of monopolies. So I'm keeping track of this whole Fortnite Epic Games story related to Apple. And I guess the more that I think about it, and we're having the experience right now where we're submitting an app that we've built to Apple and the Play Store to obviously get it out there, but and we're going through some hurdles, to say the least, to get it submitted and approved. But the more that you look at the whole app ecosystem in Apple, the more you do, just as you kind of peel back how much money they make off the App Center, in the Epic,
compared to the people that wrote the apps.
Yeah. In the Epic case, and again, I haven't read everything about it, but they were trying to go around the App Center by saying you could do like in-game purchases.
The App Store, yeah.
Yeah, and you could, and then they would keep a bigger portion of the money, right? But then Apple still wants their 30% cut of it, but the more that you just realize how dominant of a player they are, if you're just a kid who wants to build an app, but you don't want to release it on App Center, what?
App Store.
I mean, what do you?
App Center is a Microsoft product. That's why.
I'm sorry. You're right. The App Store, but if you just want to get an app out there and make a little bit of money, you're pretty limited, right?
You are.
And so the argument is that they should regulate the App Store somehow, and I don't know what that would look like, and then the other argument is that they should break the App Store apart from Apple altogether and make it a separate business altogether. But for us, I mean, we're a small player, obviously, in the world, and I think the thing I realized this week when we were submitting ours was the level of intellectual property that they get about your business. Because I'm submitting, like, they're responding and saying, we need this information from you. And I'm looking at the questions and I'm thinking, I don't want to
makes you the
I don't want to tell you that. Like that's how I felt. I mean, what are you going to do?
How much did you weigh last year when you submitted this? How much do you weigh today? It's a level of invasiveness that's just unprecedented. And talking about Apple,
right.
They charge you a $99 fee just to be able to access their documentation and do anything on their development platform.
Right.
$99 fee. Google it's free for Google, right? It's free for Microsoft. If there's a Microsoft store. But the first app I ever developed was on an Apple device. And one of the things that I wanted to do was be able to change the brightness of the display because my app required it. And I found out there is no public function available to do this. And I did a big search across the internet and I found, you can do this hack, right? There's an undocumented function that actually allows you to do it. And it's quite easy to do. You just call this undocumented function and boom, you can change it. But Apple will not approve your app to go into the App Store if you use that function. But then they came out with Bookstand. I think it was called Bookstand. You got that right.
Yeah.
And Bookstand, if you read a book in Bookstand, you can change the brightness. So if you're Apple, you can release an app to the App Store that utilizes functionality that isn't available to anybody else that has paid a fee to be on that platform. To me, that's unethical. That is grossly unethical, and they should be broken up because of that. But beyond that, if you want to put your code into the Apple Store, the only way to do it is to buy a Mac. Only way to do it is to buy or rent a Mac. Even though you don't need a Mac to compile it, you don't need a Mac to build it, that's their recommendation, and they made it impossible for you to get anything into the App Store any other way. To me, that's unethical. They keep, not only that, let me just keep going. If you create an app that they like, they will take your code and create their own app from it.
Sure.
And I don't know if they actually take your code or not. They don't need to, because they can see it, every line of it,
Right.
and produce their own thing that's better than yours. It's
Right.
It's monopolistic. It's unethical.
But there's in the development community, there is a lot of energy behind developers not liking all those restrictions, right? I mean, I think a lot of what I've read is the developers, they like the process. They just don't like all the restrictions or all the,
It's the monopolistic part of it, right? It's hey, you have to do this just because we can.
Right.
Because, well, you don't have to put your app on our store. You don't have to build apps for our product. But if you are going to, then bend over,
right?
Because we're gonna give it to you,
right? Well, and in our case, I mean, there was several...
I hate Apple. Have you noticed?
No, I haven't. So there was.
They're not going to sponsor us, that's for sure.
I'm going to write down Apple, and then next time you go onto a rant, I'll say, "What minute is this?" No. So here's just one example, not to keep going, but is I submitted our app to the store, and one of the requirements they came back with was they said, you have to give us, they implied, I suppose, that you have to give us screenshots if this was going to be displayed on an iPad, right? So at the time, I'm just thinking, this is what they're telling me I need to get it finalized.
Right.
So they have these tools that you can go out and you can stretch to look like an iPad, right? And
stretch the image.
Yeah, and that's basically what I did. So I did that. And they came back and they said, no, nice try. They said, we see that you've stretched the images to match the iPad. So we need for you to submit better screenshots. And finally, I just came back and I said, but here's the real deal. The real deal is that our users aren't even going to use it on an iPad. They're only going to use it on a phone. And so it'll be interesting to see what they come back with that. And I said in my message, oh, by the way, I don't own an iPad. Our company doesn't own an iPad, even though we do. So how do you expect me to produce what you're asking for, right? So anyway.
I can almost guess the answer that's coming back.
I'm sure you can.
Yeah. Well, go buy an iPad.
Right.
And go buy a couple Mac devices.
Right. So anyway, so, I don't know. There seems like there could be a third rail of a way to get an app deployed.
It seems like there should be. They cannot have a monopoly like that where they tie their app store and their computer business together, right? Because you don't have to have an Apple iPhone to develop for that platform. You don't have to have a Mac to develop for that platform. You only have to have those things if you want to get into their store, if you want to get past their gatekeeper.
Right.
F them.
Right.
F them.
All right.
But it's unethical, I think, and that's been the kind of I hope that's what the government was asking them about a couple weeks ago when they were talking about it. But
yeah,
let's talk about hiring and firing
okay.
For a minute, because, well, as we talked about last week, and I think maybe the week before, we are looking to hire a couple very hopefully special type A people into our company, and we've taken a new approach towards that by giving them real world test. I'm calling it a test, but it's actual work. It's actual real work that we're asking them to do. It's not critical work or time sensitive work that we've given them. But the question that comes to mind for me with regard to ethics is, how much is it ethical for me to give them my client's information, even if I have them sign an NDA and bring them on, actually hire them on as contractors to my company to pay them to do this test? And I've just wondered, right, what your opinion on as far as I gave them access to 1,693 documents.
Well, I mean, again, maybe I'll drop RSA again. But no, I mean, from my legal training background, I mean, look, if you take all the necessary precautions, right? I mean, it would be no different if we hired a contract developer and we said, hey, here's the code, here's our client, it'd be no different than that. And we have contract developers sign an NDA, we have them sign some other documents. So as long as you're protecting the business and your client, then I don't see anything wrong with it.
Well, because the reason that I asked that is just because I know we're not legally obligated. We have taken every precaution to stay within our agreement, right? We are legally bound to protect their information, and we have done that. But when I start thinking about other things that every company does today that they're legally doing, but yet, in my opinion, aren't being ethical with it, I just want to make sure that we don't cross that line in any way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, and I tend to go back to, the values in terms of transparency and some of the things that we care about, I guess, as we think about the test. What about the test would seem unethical? And in my opinion, I mean, it's because there is this contract relationship existing. I would feel differently if they weren't under contract and didn't sign an NDA. Right?
I certainly would too. I'd feel way differently. Right. But I think the part that has me questioning is just I know I'm not hiring both of these people. Right? Let's say I had 10 of them out there. I gave them all that same 1,693 documents. Mm-hmm. And knowing that only one of them will become an employee.
Right.
Now is it unethical?
Right.
Or now is it approaching it? Now is it questionable at least?
Right.
What if it's 100? What if I gave it to 100 people and really ran the test?
Right. I don't know. It kind of depends on, through the lens of risk, right? I mean, what's the risk in giving it to 2 people versus 10 versus 100? Does the risk go up exponentially with all that? I mean, I'm
sure the risk goes up, but is the risk really the increase in risk the part that's making it unethical, or is it that I know I'm not planning on hiring 99 of these 100 people or 999 of these 1,000?
Well, what is the fear that the 99 people that you don't hire would do? I mean, because maybe we should start with the definition of ethical, right? I mean, ethical is something that is, how you define your personal values, right? Your way that you look at the world and how you deal with people and deal with businesses, right? And so, does it feel uncomfortable sharing a bunch of information with a bunch of people,
knowing that the majority of them are not going to make the cut?
Right.
I guess, I don't know the answer. I just know that if I hand this to 2 people and I only hire one, well, there's a 50-50 chance that the other might not be happy, and maybe a 50-50 chance if they're not happy that they'll be disgruntled, and maybe a 50-50 chance if they are disgruntled that they'll do something that utilizing that information that is
well, I mean,
that's
turn it around though, Dan. What if it was you? What if you were the taking the test, right? And you had access to all this client's information?
Well, yeah, clearly I'd be ethical with it.
No, but I mean, what is your interpretation of somebody who would give you that kind of test? What is that?
How do I feel about that?
Right. How does it inform you as to what kind of company they are? I mean,
I think it represents us well. I do.
Right.
And I'm not saying it's unethical by any means, or even that I have a hint that it is, but without doing the critical thinking around it.
Right.
I think just having you ask that question's kind of driven me to a point where if I give this to 10,000 people or to 1,000 people, knowing that the vast majority of them are not going to be here, the chance that I'm going to find one person that will be disgruntled and hurt us becomes greater with each additional person.
Sure.
So, well, maybe it's not unethical, but maybe it's just not wise either.
Right. And there may be alternatives to achieve the same goal through different means, right? Still give a test, but maybe it's Joe Schmo's Inc.
Sure. Right. Search and replace on 1,693 documents.
Right. But I think that, but the intention though all along was that only the candidates that made it through to that particular stage would receive the test. So the likelihood that we would be giving it to a huge number of people is pretty small because we're not going to interview 2,000 people to get one person or whatever, right? So.
Right. And in my mind, I'm thinking 3 is probably the max anyway, because I cannot answer questions and give them the attention that I
and do your
hope they need.
Right.
Yeah. And do my day job.
Yeah.
So, but the other side of hiring and firing is firing. And I have let a few people go in my lifetime, and sometimes it's better than others. And
what we have learned from working in large organizations, right? In large organizations, they have this sort of, as we were talking about before we came on, they have this sort of risk calculation they have to do, right? They have to say, well, we're going to, like you said, we're going to come to you at 3:30 on a Friday. We're going to let you go so nobody around you can see that you've disappeared by Monday morning, right? Because the calculation is if we escort them out late, they're not going to throw a fit and, make a scene, or they're not going to,
there's going to be less people to see them.
They're not going to grab some document off their desk and take it with them, right? So they've got all these risk calculations they're doing. The reality of it is it's the appearance that they think they have control when really they don't. But that's the experience that me and you have had being in large organizations or businesses where they've got a formal set of ways that you go about doing this as you represent the company.
Right.
But the beauty of being in a small business is you can do it however you want to do it. And I think what I've seen in my time here is it depends. It depends on how the relationship is with the individual person, right? As I said earlier, if we've hired someone and they become disgruntled or malicious in some way to the company or to our clients, then there's a particular way that we should deal with those people.
How is that?
The way that I think we should deal with that is very firm.
Very firm and very quick.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And however, as we know, when people hire, we sometimes make a mistake. And if we make a mistake because of whatever reason, we didn't do a good job on our part of making sure they were the right fit for the company or fit for the position, and then maybe they don't make the effort that we would expect. There's a different kind of calculus that should go into a situation like that, in which I've seen us in the past say, look, we've tried each other out in our analogy. We've dated for a month or two now, and it just isn't going to work out. I had hoped it would. So maybe it would be best if you spent the next couple of weeks maybe trying to find something new. We'll kind of keep you around,
to answer questions or help transition.
Right. And then we'll just kind of part ways. I mean, you want to talk about ethical. That's a much more, in my estimation, a much more ethical, a much more feels right in terms of the values that we have, than to treat both those situations I just described, treat them as if they were the same. In other words,
right.
For us to say, well, you're a mean and nasty person, and we're going to just cut you loose as soon as we know that, and you don't seem to be working out, and maybe we had some responsibility, but we're just going to cut you loose too.
Yep. Yeah. Put them both in the same boat.
Right. And I think that's the great thing about, we get to do it however we want to. We don't have to follow some other.
Right. And I've done it both ways here. And I got to be honest with you. It feels better to break up with somebody in a humane way than to fire somebody because you're within your rights as a company and as a business, and you don't have to tell them why you're firing them. But guess what?
Right.
Goodbye.
Well, right. And I mean, I have hired plenty and fired people, and I was a part of relatively small organizations, big enough that they had HR departments, and it was like, this is the way we do it. So,
I will say, though, that when I did that, I gave them, a month? Your last paycheck will be on this date. Your last date of work will be on this date. And that whole, might have been 3 weeks prior. Mm-hmm. That whole time, all I heard in my head was cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching.
Yeah.
That money going out the window.
Right. And,
But it still felt good. I think overall it was a net win for me emotionally, knowing that I didn't have to fire somebody that had been trying really hard to do their job, just unable to.
Right. And I think the consequence of that is that and the consequence of that is the test, right? Mm-hmm. The reason why the test is created is to save money, if for no other reason, right? Because if we do a better job on the front end from our perspective, we don't waste time bringing people up to speed that aren't going to work out, and then waste money
months
telling them that well, it's not going to work out. We're trying to be nice, so maybe go look for another job.
Yeah, I think you're right. It is an investment. It's a little more upfront, but it should save us a lot on the back side of things.
Right.
Hopefully there won't be a backside. If we hire the right people, they're going to stick with it, and there won't be any need to get rid of them.
Yeah.
So what do you have on your list? I've got one more thing, but it's not a big thing.
Well, this is going to probably be weird, but stick with me.
Okay.
So you grew up in California, right?
I did.
So like what time period? Like
I was born in 1964.
Okay.
Moved out of California end of 1982.
Okay. So did you ever go to Disneyland?
Oh my God, plenty of times. Plenty of times. Yeah. I got kicked out of Disneyland plenty of times.
Right. So I'm watching this documentary. It's called The Imagineers, and it's a story of. It's not less so about the story of Walt Disney himself and his background, but it's more the story of how he brought these people together to create Disneyland, right? And so I did not realize parts of this, but obviously I didn't realize that Walt Disney grew up in Marceline, Missouri.
Yeah.
And that Disneyland was created based on the town square of Marceline, Missouri. That the whole spoke idea that there's a center to Disneyland and that everything is a spoke off of it was based on the town center where he grew up.
I had read that before somewhere. I had forgotten it, though.
Yeah. But so I'm watching this, and I'm watching it not from the story of it was interesting. The fact that Disneyland at the time when it opened in 1954 cost $17 million and was 3 times over budget was pretty amazing. But I was watching it more from like an innovator or an engineer that he was. And the fact that he really, in a way, there were a lot of really groundbreaking things that he did that are kind of related back to technology and the way that we do things. So if you think about it, he literally was one of the main inventors of animatronics, right? Mm-hmm. So he was building robots, way before his time, right? Robots that we think of now and thinking of animatronics, when he did it, I mean, they're one and the same thing, right? I mean, One is more sophisticated than the other, obviously, but it is interesting to see how many parallels there are between wasn't called technology at the time, probably, or maybe it was, in terms of what he was building to put inside his park, right? The other thing that I realized that I thought of was I always think of, how we talk about agile and all that. And you really start looking at the way that he assembled teams to put together different parts of the park. They were art directors, they were engineers, they were this team of people that were super agile in terms of the way they had to work together, and they were really diverse in terms of where they were coming from, much like a UI UX person, a developer, a quality person, right? It's all the same to me, right? In some ways. And then the other side of it is, in a way, he was kind of ahead of his time in the whole remote workforce, right? Because when they were building Disney World, they said, we are scattered all over this giant piece of land, and we're all not showing up to work all in the same spot. But Walt Disney knows exactly where we're all at, right? He knows that the art directors are over here and that the engineers are over here doing this, but it's all super coordinated. But we're not all in one room, all working together on the same thing, right? And so one of the guys who was he was actually one of the guys who was a part of building Disneyland said, he's like, it's super organized chaos. And I always think of that in the context of development, right? In that we are really organized about the way we go do things, but the agile part of the way that we do things is the chaos part. In some ways,
agile, I think, helps us bridge the chaotic moments and bring them back into control. Right. Because you've got to be able to move as things change. I think that's kind of the relationship.
Well, and what I guess what I saw as parallels was the chaos is the ability to adjust. Right. The ability to iterate is the chaos in my mind. Right. It's like we're iterating off of these different ideas. That's their chaos, is as they're building the park, they're having to think of, we can't do it this way, we've got to do it this way, right? We don't have these materials, so we've got to use these materials, right?
Right.
So, but it's an interesting documentary to watch just because of that fact of
What's the name of it?
It's called The Imagineer Story.
The Imagineers.
Yeah.
Let me write that down.
And the Imagineers was a term he had created, combining both the sort of the art side of things, the imagined part, and with the engineers, right? Because what they said was he originally went to a bunch of architects and he said, here's what I want to do. I want to build this park and here's what it's going to have. And he said all the plans that he received back from the architects were all exactly that. They were just architecture. He's like, they weren't creative. They had no color. They were just, this is what I want built, and here it is, right? Yeah. He said, so what he did was he went to the art directors and he said, and these are people that are, coloring all of his cartoons and helping him build 50,000 Leagues Under the Sea, on the movie sets, right? The people that were sort of storyboarding or creating those environments, those are the people that he went to and said, here's what I want to build. It's a theme park, and this is what I want it to be. And they came back to him with a different vision of what it was by comparison to the architects that he talked to. More color, more themes, more just, it was a much more, it was a better environment that they created, right?
Because it was more creative?
Yeah. And so the one interesting thing is, do you remember, I went to Disneyland like late 80s maybe. So they had the one ride that was the you get in the boat and you go through the jungle. I forget what it's called now. And they had like a hippo that would pop out. And so I don't know if Jungle Cruise was it might have been called or something.
Sounds about right.
Right. Yeah. So the guy that they hired to build that, they literally they put an ad in the Orange County newspaper and they said, if you have a giant palm tree in your yard and you don't want it, give us a call. We'll come take it out of your yard. because they ran out of palm trees to plant for that ride. So then they resorted to grabbing orange and lemon trees and planting them in the ride because they ran out of trees. So then what they would do is they would have to send workers in periodically and go pick all the oranges and lemons because oranges and lemons don't grow in the jungle.
Right.
So, but the interesting thing was when they built the ride, they first had to build the sort of where all the waterways, right? So before they put the water in, they had this guy who was I think he was a engineer. And it shows him in the film, it shows him driving his station wagon as if he was on the boat, but going through to gauge, well, when I go around this turn, this is where the hippo would pop out. And then he drives the station wagon a little farther. Now, when I come around this bend, this is where the giant giraffe would jump. So he's literally envisioning it as he's going through before they even poured all the water in there and put the boat in. It was just the process of how he thought about it I thought was really cool.
Interesting.
Yeah. So there is a correlation back to us. And
okay.
So and that is just in the way that his involvement in innovation and technology and how that is a parallel to kind of what we do now, in my opinion, is the way that we look at technology and use technology, the way that you have to be innovative and creative in the same projects, right? I think that's all interesting to draw that connection between what he was doing at the time to what kind of what we do now.
Yeah, he was ahead of his time in a way because his vision was so different than what anybody could imagine. Mm-hmm. He was working kind of under the same constraints that we are, right? Like we can't really, I can imagine that you can't really talk about the park that he was building because it was too abstract, right? Until it was built, you couldn't point at that thing and talk about it.
Right.
And that's very similar to
he said
technology.
They said that every Sunday, Walt Disney would come down to the Disneyland site, and he would always have this like deep sigh, much like, sometimes our clients do when they see the progress that we're making. And they would say, he said he would look around at the park and he'd say, nobody right now would pay 15 cents for anything in this place because it was still under construction and they were still building it. And he's like, and that worries me. It worried him so much that at 52, they ran out of money building Disneyland that he went out and cashed out his life insurance policy to continue to fund the development. And interestingly enough, he had employees, people working to build Disneyland, actually contributed their own money to see that it was finished.
Wow.
Yeah. So you want to talk about employee engagement.
So plus the fact that it was 3 times over budget, very, very similar to...
I was going to let you point that out. So anyway, I watched that last night and I thought that I did make some notes here to interesting connections, I guess.
Yeah, you should watch Social Dilemma for no other reason than just to be aware of what the monster looks like.
Yeah, you're right. So anyway, you said you had something else.
I have. So I've noticed a few communications, emails in between business partners. And I've noticed this one thing that just kind of bugs me. And it's back maybe under ethics. I don't know. This is kind of what led me here. And so it's the use of people that aren't really in the conversation, where you're using them as a lever or a hammer. For instance, our guy used one of these recently, our guy being our project manager, and he sent an email to our clients, and we're talking about how our developer did this, and our developer thinks that, and our developer couldn't find this thing in the file that you sent. And it just kind of bugged me.
Yeah.
It just bugged me. And I can't quite put my finger on it, but it seems to me that it seems to me like, first of all, it's divulging a bunch of information that's unnecessary, right? Like who did what within our company doesn't matter to our client. I think whether or not we are providing the value that they want, whether we're answering their questions, whether, we're engaging with them correctly, that's what they want, right? But to know that Dan did that, actually wasn't Dan, it was who cares, right? Who cares? As a company, this is what is happening. And when you spend time elaborating those details that seem to me to be irrelevant to the client, I wonder why people do that. And I'm talking about our developer because I don't want to talk about the company that really spurred the emotions within me.
Right.
Well,
think about this though, Dan. This is an experience that frustrates me, and this happens a lot in large organizations. You call in to some company and the number that you were given was the number that you thought was the number that you would call to resolve the issue. That's why you called.
Right.
You call in and they say, look, that's wrong. Really, you got to call this number. This is the different department that's specifically dealing with that thing.
Yep.
So now basically what you're asking me to do is navigate your company internally, right? And that's not
right.
that's not my job.
Even sharing that information with you
right.
implies that,
right.
hey, you have something to learn.
Right. Right. And so that to me is in a lot of cases, the implication of that is it's not my job to figure this thing out. It's this other department's job to figure this thing out. Right. Mm-hmm. And that's what, when I hear you talk about that story, that's what I hear is I hear somebody who's not willing to take responsibility and isn't looking at their job as a part of a company and responsibility to an organization, right? I see that as being, don't blame me for this, but our developer said this.
Right.
Right. And the reality of it is that to go use the old adage of we don't care how the sausage is made, we just want the end product. Right. And I think that's what our clients often feel is we gave you this project. We don't need to understand all the inner workings of everything that's going to happen between the beginning and the end. We just need to know that the end is what we asked for.
That's it. Yeah.
Right? And yeah, there may be some in between stuff that we need to consult with them on, but we don't need to share with them the inner questions and
right.
turmoil whatever you want to call it.
There's a level of detail that is appropriate, I think, because they want to know stuff is happening. They want to know that you're moving forward with, their requests. And so you got to give them some kind of update, but you got to balance. I think you have to look at it, like you said, from what information do they need versus what information do I need to give them? Right. And you need to know the difference, right? And when you're talking about the details within your organization, like I've been on those calls too, where they tell me, first of all, not only that I called the wrong number, but what their role in the organization is and what this team that they're on does and what this other team does and why I should have called them. Like that is great. I'm glad you know all that. But if you really wanted to take care of me as a customer, you would have either just transferred me and passed on all my information so I didn't have to give it again, or you'd have just taken care of it.
Right.
And I think that's what I want to give to our clients is that, right? No, at no time I'm hoping should they have a reason to sit there and wonder why we told them something. Right. Why are you hiding behind developer, or why are you hiding behind, somebody that isn't in this relationship?
Right. Yeah. And I mean, that's, I think in a lot of cases, in my experience, when I've dealt with people who I've worked with that would oftentimes say, well, I can't get my job done because the developer can't get their job done. That's the kind of message you're sending, right? Is, well, I told you I'd have an update this week, but our developer, right? And that's just, that's what that tells you is that boy, at least what it tells me is, well, oh, so you're not really working on a team.
What it tells me is, oh, so you really don't need this job.
Well, you know what I'm saying, though? I mean, If you're working on a team, you don't start throwing everybody under the bus, so to speak, of, well, I can't get my part done because my teammate sucks, right? What you do is you say,
what can I do to help?
Right. I committed to this. I didn't get this done, and here's when I can get it done by.
Exactly.
I don't need to explain anything else. So.
How did you handle that when you were in college and they asked you to do a group project? Right. I mean, because that's inevitably how it works when you're on a team, right? You've got a couple of those 5 people that aren't going to do a damn thing.
Well, it's interesting that you asked me that because, now that Maddie's at college, she's having a lot more of that, a lot more kind of group projects and everything. And Maddie experienced that, which is kind of a weird way. Was she was in different plays and stuff, and so everybody's got to show up and know your lines and all that stuff. This is the magic of a good leader or a good whatever you want to call it, somebody coordinating a group project or something, is the ability to communicate to somebody or to a group what the goal is, why it's important, and what the sort of like, why are we doing this together, right? Because inevitably, if the group doesn't work well, what it ultimately breaks down into, well, you got to do your part. And to me, that's not a helpful discussion, right? That's compliance, right? That's, you got to do your part because you said you were going to do your, not this collective, we're working in this together. We understand what the goal is. You understand your role. I understand my role. If you don't do your part, then it affects, all that stuff. It's just a different way of working, I think.
I think you're right. I think that's agile, right? In my opinion, I use agile to mean a lot of different business processes. But what it means to me is that you make the changes necessary to optimize your efforts, optimize the results of your effort. I've been on teams before where people just were not motivated to be a part of that team. And so how do you continue? Well, you go on without them, right? Because you have a job to do, and that's to, as a team, get to the end goal. So specifically in college, right, that was a great experience for me because you inevitably never run across a 5 or 4 person team where everybody is in, right? In fact, it's par for the course for 2 people only to be in. I don't care what size team is, right? If 2 people, and they're smart people, and the rest of the people think they can slough off, they will. That's not common in business, but the approach is still the same. I think if you're a good member of a team, then you do whatever needs to be done to help that team succeed. And you're right there with them the whole time, marching along hand in hand with the rest of the team towards failure, if that's where you're headed, but towards the end.
But the reason why you're making that observation is in this particular case with our project manager, is that the connection?
Well, it was tying back into business ethics. I guess I got a little frustrated over this week dealing both with the amount of information that is being spread in the world that it's noise, right? And the whole idea that if somebody, the preacher was here yesterday, that preacher stands down in the corner with the big microphone and the big speaker. Yeah, he was here yesterday, standing right underneath the walkways, which caused a really loud echo. And he had that thing cranked up and I could hear it blasting sitting here on the 4th floor. And I had a discussion with Tyler about it. I said, well, what do you think about that? Well, he has a right to stand there. You're right, he does. And he has a right to believe what he believes, and he has a right to talk about it. But does he have the right to blast it with a speakerphone? I think it's unethical, right? I get it. You want to get your message out there. You might even feel like you are doing your Lord's work. But what if your speaker was just a little bit louder? What if it was loud enough that everybody in the city could hear it? What's the difference between that? It's just all shades of gray again. So you're standing right there that anybody that is walking past you cannot hear what they're saying to each other, right? So they can't have a conversation around you. You stole that from them. You took it from them. I don't know, stole it is the right word, but you certainly absconded with it. what if you turned it up another 10 notches and I couldn't walk another block down the road and still couldn't have a conversation? You've absconded with my rights to have that conversation and to hear, for instance, the crosswalk sign saying it's now time to cross Main Street, right? You couldn't hear those yesterday, by the way.
Right.
Because he was doing his thing.
Right.
Some companies create so much damn noise out there that you cannot tell anymore what's real and what isn't real. And that movie Social Dilemma talks about a lie spreads 6 times faster on social media than the truth.
Yeah.
And so we're getting to the point that we really need to start looking at all of this stuff. And for years, we've allowed people to stand on corners with a speakerphone and talk all they want because it's freedom of speech. Well, it is freedom of speech, but speech does not include a loudspeaker. It does not include raising your voice so loud that nobody can respond to you. That's not speech. That's obnoxiousness.
Right. Well, I guess what I was trying to draw the connection to is it control? Is it like, is there? I was reading something the other day that said the uncertainty of the times that we are in is causing us to look at everything that is uncertain, right? So we're paying more attention now to social media, even more so because of a pandemic that we're not in control of, right?
Maybe, yeah, I don't know.
So we begin to look around our entire environment and say, oh my God, look at all this stuff that is not in my control, right? And it's highlighting that now because we've added another thing that seems out of our control, right?
I'm not sure that I totally resonate with that. I'm not sure that, I see a lot of things that are different and people are looking at different things nowadays and they're hearing different things, but I think a lot of that is that they're being fed different foods, right? Their social media feed is what they trained it to be. They're what they're seeing on Google when they get out there to go search for global warming is what they trained it to do. It is nothing like what mine is and is nothing like what yours is, but there's this false belief amongst all of us that we're all looking at the same show. We're all watching the same internet, but we're not.
Right.
We're not. Because our key to the internet is Google search, and Google search is changing it for us.
Right.
Is it for us? I don't know if it's for us or not, but they're certainly changing it. But
right.
My whole point was that I guess it's back to ethics, and it's if you're a person, if you're a vendor, and you are trying to build a relationship with a prospective clients, I think everything matters. Everything that you use to represent yourself matters. And if you have to use words to get around your responsibility, that's just as visible as the fact that you're not being responsible for it, right? So really nothing much more than that, except for I would like us to look at our business communications and make sure that we're minimizing the amount of words that our clients have to read, that we're making it easy for them to understand the point that we're making, and then we're not making so many points that we're causing noise that they then have to talk over or talk around or go a block down the street to have a conversation from. You know what I mean? I don't want to be a part of the noise. I guess that's where I was going with it.
Right. Well, and I guess I have a little, my additional take on that was just, I want people, and this is part of our job is I want people that work here to, we always throw around this term that we want people to own it, right? But you got to help people own it, right? As a company, you got to help people, understand how they can take responsibility for their position and their representation of the company, right? Mm-hmm. I told you a long time ago that, for many years, the way that I worked was I worked like a lot of people do, like it's a transaction, right? You pay me money, I show up, I do the job, right?
Yeah, 40 hours. 39.5.
Right. But then after a while, and this is part of maybe growing up in small business, after a while, I changed my thinking about it. And I said, what if I act like an owner? What if I just come in and act like if we lose that sales opportunity, it hurts me as much as it hurts the salesperson. If we win it, good for us. If Julie screws up with the account and doesn't do a good job of servicing that client, it impacts me. So I'm invested in Julie to get her job done right. So if I just start coming into work every day and I start looking at it as if I own it, and I realize that's not how everybody can do, how they can look at things like that. But I just noticed when I showed up and I started looking at the place that I was going to work as if I owned it, it changed a lot of the way that I looked at things.
Which probably it really did change not only the way you saw them, but you changed the reality. When you change how you look at them, everything changes.
Right.
Napoleon Hill put that in his first, in his 18 book Law of Success course.
Yeah. And I picked up on it because it was kind of at the forefront of like the servant leadership kind of model that was coming out. And I really got identified with that a lot. And so I just started doing that. And then what was interesting was people noticed the difference. People were like, so I was making observations within the company that they were like, well, that's not your job.
Yeah, but it affects me.
Right. Yeah, and so
it's infectious, that kind of attitude. Isn't it?
And it was like, well, I mean, that's a fair point that you make, Matt, but you're just this lowly analyst.
Stay in your lane.
Right. You're over here in your analyst job. What do you mean you care about this, what's going on with sales, right? So and I think that's the kind of thing, that going back to hiring, I mean, how do you ensure that the next person that we hire will look at it like that, right? Because I think that over the time that I've been here, we've had a mixed bag of people that some have looked at it like that, some have looked at it like the, transaction. I just show up for Dan and give him my hours and go home, right? But how do we ensure that the next wave of people that we bring on, that we can qualify them by saying, are you a person that looks at this in this way, right? And that's a hard thing to really understand, I think.
I think you're right. Well, it may be hard to understand for some people. I don't think it's hard to understand. It's just hard to fathom why you would do it. On the surface, there doesn't seem to be a obvious reward to that effort, except for the owner, right? If the owner wants everybody to come in here and act like you're the owner and take responsibility for your work like you're the owner, then some people are going to look at that and go, I know why you want me to do that, because it's better for you. The truth of the matter is that it's not. I mean, it might be. It definitely will be better for the owner if everybody in his company is fully engaged. But the truth of the matter is that having that attitude and taking that approach is better for you as a person. Whether you blossom that ability at this company or the next company, wherever you use that in your life, you will have a better career opportunity waiting for you.
Yeah, I think we had a conversation a few weeks ago about Chase and him working at the company that he was working at. And you had made the point to him that to say, build relationships. You think that you're worth this amount of money and you should be making X amount of dollars by a certain time, but change the thought process, right? If you work on building relationships, then maybe the money will follow.
Yeah, I didn't say that because I don't believe it. No. If you work on building the relationships, the money will follow. Yeah. Right? Not maybe. If you work towards making $100,000 a year, maybe you'll get there.
Right.
Because your focus is making the money, and everybody will look at that and think, well, you're not in it for me. You're not in it for us. You're in it for you.
Right.
So, yeah, I hope you got that message. I hope everybody that is trying to build their career and grow in this new world that we live in understands that it's not about the value you get, it's about the value you give. The value you get will come back to you. And I'm not a particularly religious person, but I do believe this, that the tithing brings back money to you, that investment in that kind of emotional, soft type skill will return tenfold to you with the amount of time and effort you put into it. Napoleon Hill said, every day as you go through the world, make a habit of doing things that need to be done, that nobody asks you to do, and that you expect no reward from. It is those kinds of investments in the ether that produce massive amounts of results that you weren't expecting to come, but that will change your life and your career.
So you're talking about karma.
I mean, that's one thing that people have used. Karma sounds, I'm not really sure what karma is, but it seems to be like a God smack, right? You did something against God, now God's going to punish you. Or you did something good for God, now God's going to give it back to you. And I don't really think of it like that. I think it's really more mathematical. I think the whole universe is probably just a part of a bigger system. And that system is defined and it works the way it works. Even though it seems so complex and chaotic to us, it doesn't make sense to me that it's truly chaotic. It's chaotic to us because we are limited in our ability to understand it. But regardless of our ability to understand it, I know the results of doing this are what I say they are. Right. If you invest your time in doing things that nobody expects you to do, nobody asks you to do, and that you don't expect to get paid for, but things that need to be done nevertheless, picking up a piece of trash off the curb and putting it in a trash can, for instance, all of that kind of thing is investment in some reward that you will get down the road.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I immediately think of growing up when I was a kid with my dad. And my dad was always this sort of action-oriented guy, right? He was a guy that if he saw something that needed to be done, he was the guy that would just go do it, right? And when I was growing up, if I was the kid that was sitting on the curb and there was that job in front of me that needed to be done and I was still sitting on the curb, he would just say, why aren't you doing the job? Right. So he was always that guy that just, took action, I think. Right. Whether or not he was going to get any return for it or not, he just knew that it was the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, and people from your dad's era had, I think, a greater motivation to do things just because they felt like it was the right thing to do. It was instilled in them to a much greater degree that doing the right thing was your duty.
This has been one thing that has kind of come up around COVID. And what's interesting about it is I don't think that we've sort of solved for it just yet. So is this an accurate statement that in a I don't know what the right period of time to compare is, 50, 60, 70, whatever the time period. Does it feel like that because what that talks about a little bit is our civic duty to one another, right? That we see ourselves in a community and we have a responsibility to our community, and that we do things in our community because we feel a responsibility to that community, right? There's been a lot of conversation around COVID that says this has highlighted how that is broken, right?
Sure.
And then we could also draw the connection back to our conversation about social media. And maybe
It also highlighted the same thing. Right.
And so the question then becomes, if our civic responsibility to each other is eroded or become retarded in some way, then how do we get it back? Right.
Yeah. That is a great question, and I have no clue how we're going to get there. But I do have really strong faith that we will. I think, I don't think I'm the sharpest crayon in the box. And if I'm noticing these things, I know that there's other people noticing them out there, and those people will change the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know what to do, Matt, to tell you the truth, other than to talk about it and have these kinds of discussions. And I think if you and I talk about it and we're in agreement that, that's kind of a shitty way to market, let's not do that. And you have that conversation with another person and they have it. Right. I think, that's
something.
That's something. Right.
Yeah. And I also think that, right now, especially what the election is in, 40 days or whatever. That is still 8
weeks.
That is still the quintessential civic duty, right? To go vote, right?
You want to talk a little bit about politics?
I don't, but if you're going to get as fired up about it as Apple as you are, but what I'm getting at is that is the one thing we still do that is civically tied, right? Is voting. And I think that, some people do still see that as their responsibility, right, to their community and their nation. But
some people right now see it as their responsibility not to vote.
Right.
And that's sickening. Right.
But it begs the question, though, what else can we do in our communities that show that we're trying to reinstill our civic duty to one another, right? Voting is just obviously the one that's still left, apparently. But I think there's, not to keep talking about my family, but my dad. I mean, my dad every Sunday takes food from his church and he takes it down to Catholic Charities, down to a homeless shelter. Nobody asked him to do that. Nobody said, hey, but my dad feels...
Did your church say he could do it? I mean...
No, he just said, look, I want to participate. How can I participate? And they said, well, we need food for homeless shelters. And he's like, I'll do it, right? And so he just does it. My parents, every Thanksgiving, volunteer at the... and now I'm going to forget. I forgot now. Salvation Army. Mm-hmm. Nobody asked them to do that. They do it, right? So I just think it's a level of desire to want to engage at that level with your community, right?
And I think your parents were raised in a time where that was
valued.
Yeah, that was valued, and it was ingrained in us from grade school on. And I don't think it is anymore. I think you read that book, The Coddling of the American Mind.
You mentioned it a couple of times now.
Have I mentioned that before?
Right. But I guess what I'm getting is I look at things like on a practical level, like with something like this, right? Like, what are the concrete things that we could do to reinstill civic mindedness in people, right? And what you're talking about is kind of in our business, what we can do to kind of, right?
No, I'm not. Well, sure, in our business, what can we do? But no, I think we're in a serious dilemma here in this world. We have become polarized on two ends of some arbitrary spectrum. And I say it's arbitrary because we're not really fighting about anything in particular. We're fighting against those people because they want to tear down the world, and they're fighting against us because they believe we want to tear down the world. And, I hear things like, in fact, I heard on NPR, there was a Trump rally, and there were some people outside the Trump rally, and the article was talking about everybody being so peaceful and calm, and they interviewed one of these Trump supporters who said, why they were there, and he gave Trump a lot of credit, and then mentioned offhandedly that those Democrats want to destroy America. And somebody behind him said, yeah, they do. That scares the shit out of me. I mean, where are they getting that, right? First of all, I don't think there is a group of Democrats. I don't. I think there are a group of people that believe that Democrats have a better approach, but they believe for different reasons, right? And so when I hear people say that, like my mom the other day said, those damn Democrats, Mom, you're talking to one, right? I don't know that I'm actually a damn Democrat, but I know I'm in the group of people that she wants to call the enemy, because I am not a Trump supporter.
Right.
Right. And so if you're not where she is, or with where that group of people that she identifies with that see the same feed that she sees, if you're not there, you're the enemy.
Right.
And you're not the enemy behind us on the further right. You're the enemy over there at the other end, and everybody in between us.
But to bring the whole thing kind of full circle, though, is here we sit on 9/11, and there's this giant catastrophe that has happened in our country, and when the buildings had fallen and everybody was looking for victims, there weren't a bunch of Democrats or Republicans looking for bodies, right? And I think it's sad that it has to take that level of a disaster for us to forget about our feed, right? But it seems to be that the only way we can really forget about and become unified or civic minded is if we have to come together for a disaster, right? Because everything less than that seems to be,
Yeah, I don't know why politics has to have this characteristic to it, but I can't. I have not seen a politician yet that was not pointing out their position's strengths in comparison to their opponent's failures or lack of strength. And I think anytime you try to divide people into two camps, vote for me, not for them because they're evil, you're
participating in the noise.
Participating in the problem, right? I think we need a leader, and we need a party, and we need people that understands what we're looking for is not somebody that has all the answers, but somebody that wants to work for all of us.
Right.
And not just their party or the other side.
It's funny that I worked with this guy once. His name was Vance. Yeah. And Vance was this
what was his last name?
I can't remember now. He was a big guy, and he had this. It was really simple, but he's like, we were having a group conversation, and he said, "Let me just ask the group." He said, "If your neighbor's trash blows into your yard, what do you do?"
Yeah, good question. What do you do, Matt?
Yeah. He's like, "Matt, are you the type of person who picks that trash up and takes it over to his yard and says, 'Get your trash off my lawn'? Or are you the guy that picks up the trash, puts it in your trash bin, and goes about your day?"
I'm going to guess you're the latter. I know I am.
Right. And to me, and I know this is really simplistic, but that to me is civic. That's a civic thing, right? It's like, it's our neighborhood. Your trash blew into my yard. I picked it up, right? That's symbolic to me in some ways. So, and I guess
that's a good question to ask people, and I think you're absolutely right that the mentality that would do one or the other is the root of the problem.
Right. I think that and I always, I didn't sign up for a political podcast.
We waited till the last 5 minutes. So,
but I will say the one, I always seem to focus on tactics. But the one thing that I'm interested to see, and we talked about this a little bit, just with the debates next week. Is that I don't know, but
I think so. Yeah.
Is this commentary that I heard that what would the strategy be that Biden takes? And what me and you talked about was there's a lot of commentary that says, don't go debate a liar, right? Try to go debate, or try not to debate anybody. But to your point, try to go have a conversation with the country about how you're going to do things, not how you're going to tear him down or fix his problems, or and that's a really kind of deft kind of thing to pull off, right? Because
right now it is, because people don't want you to,
right?
That might be considered weak.
People will look at that potentially, and they will say he's running from a fight, right? But if he does but if he does it well, people will say he's trying to elevate the conversation, right?
And that's what I'm hoping to hear. I've thought about this, and there's been some people talking about the tactics that are going to take place. And, you know, Trump is going to talk about Biden, how he's not capable, how he's going to sell out to the far left. And I mean, he's already starting, right? Because he gets a lot more airtime than Biden does just because of his job.
Right.
So you kind of know what's coming from him. And status quo would say that Biden is probably gearing up to say the same things about him. But God, wouldn't it be great if either one of them would just rise above it? And, you know, let's say that Trump tells Biden, you know, you're going to do this and blah, blah, blah. And Biden just says, I appreciate your opinions. Right. And here's what I'm going to talk about, and not attack him back and not even let those things affect him or feel like he has to respond to them. Just like, I understand your position and go on. Put the trash in your trash can and go about your.
Yeah. And I don't know. I think, you know, I will say this, that as an independent voter, my phone has been ringing a lot lately with a lot of.
My phone?
Mine has.
I haven't been getting a call.
So my phone has been ringing quite a bit with,
I've had the same number.
A lot of.
For the audience. I've had the same number for 23 years. And I recently got a new number and gave Matt my old phone so that he could test some Android stuff. But I think it's funny because he gets dozens, I'm guessing, calls from spammers.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I just mean, even on my personal phone, I'm getting a lot of calls now from robocalls, just people, you know, we understand you're an independently registered voter, trying to figure out where you're at. And
that's why they're calling you.
Yeah.
I'm registered as a Republican. I'm not getting a lot of calls. I'm not. I mean, but I also don't answer. I'm not getting a lot of calls from numbers that I don't know, but I don't answer the calls from numbers I don't know either. Right. Well, I'm sure you're getting a whole bunch of text messages from the Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of text messages.
I was getting a bunch of those by the time I was like, dang, I messaged him one time.
And we come back to social media.
Yeah. Anyway, that's a little over 2 hours.
Yeah.
Matt, it has been a breeze. We flew right through this without taking a break, man. Yeah. Good talk.
Right.
I enjoyed it. Hope our audience enjoyed it. Please leave comments and tell us how stupid we are if you want to in the comments, and we will respond nicely.
Right.
And appreciate your opinion.
There you go.
All right.
See you guys later.
Bye.